So guys, I want to be able to give a personality profiling tip or a lesson for how to be able to profile different players in poker. This also helps you in life in general. And just the background of where I got all this, I'm like obsessed with personality tests, and I've read all these books, and so much credit goes to all these people, Danny Johnson and Carol Tuttle and all the personality stuff. Ultimately, I've come up with my own and it works for me. And I know that a lot of you guys are not going to like the idea of having a box, like being put in a little box and everything. But the fact is that I've used this and a lot of people use this and it works. And it works in a shallow way. So you don't want to take this so literal and like every single aspect, it's super down to the roots. But in a general way, generally speaking, this works. And you can use this very practically at the tables. So I'm going to share it with you, and if it helps, then use it. But don't be so like stubborn about it. Just try to be open-minded to it, because it will really help you be able to profile people and be able to connect with people that you normally couldn't connect with. Okay? So what this is, it's the 4 energy quadrants, right? So there's going to be 4 quadrants and 4 types of energies. If any of you guys have seen the Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's like my favorite show. It's a Nickelodeon show. It's so good. But on there, you'll see that there's 4 types of energies. There's air, fire, water, and earth. Okay? And these 4 energy types constitute basically like all your energy. Okay, so everybody's got a little bit of each of these 4 in them. And something that you really want to think about is that you're not only 1 or 2 things. You are a little bit of everything. Okay, so this isn't necessarily personality, it's more energy. So like a certain type of energy, some people might say, oh, if you're a really happy person, you're an air, and if you're a grumpy person, you're an earth. That's not true, because grumpy isn't what defines the energies, or it's not what defines the person. It's basically how is that person grumpy. Because an air acting grumpy is very different than an earth acting grumpy. They both can be grumpy. It's like what is their energy like when they're grumpy? Okay, so think of more energy versus like adjectives. This person's a happy person, they're this. This person loves people, they're this. This person loves, they're competitive, and they're that. Like, avoid all that. Think of energy, and then you'll be a lot more accurate in your assessments of people, okay? So saying that, there's 4 quadrants, and at the top left, you're gonna find air, and then at the top right, you're gonna find fire. The bottom left, you're gonna find water, and the bottom right, you're gonna find earth. And the perfect opposites basically are going to be crisscrossed, right? So air and earth are going to pretty much be opposite, and then water and fire will be pretty opposite. And the way it typically works is a person is generally dominant in one energy, and they have a very strong secondary to support that first one. Sometimes they even have a third supporting those, or sometimes they have 2 that are pretty equal supporting the one. And it's very rare that one person will be like fire, secondary water, or air, secondary earth. It does happen sometimes, but most of the time that happens is usually, not always, but usually because of trauma, or some kind of like crazy thing has happened, or this person's just a very complicated person. Okay, so keeping that in mind, right? Keep an open mind. We're gonna start with the energy types of air, okay? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through each of the energy types, and then I'm gonna talk about like the typical weaknesses and the strengths of them, and like what they like to do, how they like to act typically, and maybe give you some examples of it, okay? And before I actually get into that, I wanna also show you that a couple similarities. So you'll notice on the top row where you have air and fire, this horizontal row is going to be a lot more movement oriented. And you'll notice that air is like, it moves a lot. Airs, like, they require high amounts of movement, freedom, and fire is lots of movement. It needs a lot of circulation and movement. Whereas if you go to the bottom horizontal line of waters, and earths, you're gonna notice that that row is much more still. You know, water is always flowing. It's very movement oriented, but it's very gentle, very still, very like, so you'll notice that waters and earths a lot of times are more stoic, or they're a little more prone to being calm or thoughtful or like still, versus like airs and fires are a lot more like movement, let's go, like, you know. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Energy, don't be like, oh, fires and airs move and earths and waters never move. I'm not saying that. I'm talking energy. Think energy, okay? Now, if we're gonna go over to the vertical lines, over here on the left, you're gonna have your airs and your waters. And these types of people are very emotional and very, like, emotion and very people oriented typically. They typically value a lot of relationships, and they're very intuitive typically. They value intuition. Their energy is very much like what they feel, how they think of people, how they connect with people, and very much like typically will like to avoid conflict. Very people oriented, very intuitive, very emotional, right, based. And then if you go over here to the right side, the vertical, you'll notice that fires and earths are much more logic, much more competitive, and much more like fact driven. And I'm not saying that airs and waters don't do facts and don't do details. They do, but it's like their energy is a lot more like they're very intuitive a lot more. Whereas you'll know an earth and a fire because they're very like bam, like they like their logic, they like their facts, and these energies have an easier time putting people to the side, people secondary, whereas these types of people have a lot harder time. They have an easier time putting people over the details and the facts. You know, like, oh, but they're a good person or whatever. And it's a fun little balance. You'll be able to notice the differences, okay? And like I said earlier, you'll notice that the crosses are very opposite, okay? So like the perfect opposites are just right across from each other. So saying that, starting with air, airs, the word that you want to use to describe air is fun. Fun, imaginative, freedom, okay? Think of a balloon. Balloons float, they fly, they're light. So airs, they don't like a lot of heavy things a lot of times. They like heavy topics, negativity, people saying no, people being serious a lot of times, you know, people being grumpy. A lot of times, like, airs can be grumpy, but their energy is usually very light, very playful, you know, like kind of like a Robin Williams or a Will Smith kind of character, you know. They value freedom, and they really don't like a lot of people telling them they can't do things and restricting things. And airs can also be very scattered. They can be very disorganized, but they have very good ideas, and they typically do very well with people. And they can be very competitive and have a lot of fun. But like if you ask them to sit in a rigid form and do things perfectly well by the letter, a lot of times it's hard for them. Like that's not their energy. You know, that's more earth. Earth is very heavy, like think of a mountain, right? So we'll get to earth later, but like air, you know, like if you know an air energy person and you know, you start talking about heavy and negative things, it's like putting a rock in their balloon and it just sinks it down, right? So people, air energies, like if they're around a lot of negative people or negativity, they're very emotion driven and very intuitive. So they can feel that energy, and they're very prone to reacting to that. So that's something very interesting about airs, okay? Weaknesses of airs could be like they could be very forgetful sometimes. A lot of times they could be a little bit selfish because they want to just have fun all the time, and they can kind of almost like forget important things because they just want to have fun. And so it'd be really good for airs to slow down and remember some of the details and remember what the important things are. Okay, so now let's go over to fire. Okay, fires are also very movement oriented like airs, but they're very, very, like the word, right? A couple words to describe a fire is they love challenges. They like things that are hard. They're very competitive, very driven, and ambitious. So fires, you can almost identify a fire right off the bat when you meet him. You're like, hey Johnny, how are you? Hey, hey, nice to meet you too. yeah, I saw you over here. I've been over here working. I own this business here. And, you know, like I used to be the state champion quarterback for my football team. And like they start talking about their accomplishments very quickly because fires value status. They value accomplishing things. They value getting shit done, right? So fires are very detail oriented, very logical, very fact driven, and a lot, to be honest, fires a lot of times are the people that get things done more than most others. Unfortunately, they're also the ones that piss everybody off, and they can lose friends faster than most others. So fires can get things done amazingly fast. They also, like fire, they burn, they get things done, but they can make a big mess along the way. They're not always the most efficient. You know, they're like kind of like a shotgun shooting a little target, and it's like bam, and it blows up the whole target, and it's like, okay, you got it, but I mean like you got it, overkill, right? And you know, maybe we have to clean up the mess now. You could have got the job done with just a little BB gun, you know. And so fires a lot of times just overkill, overdo things, and they're super competitive, super driven, and they just can't get enough of competition. And you'll know fires, they talk louder, they're very competitive. They value like status, and a lot of times they're the alpha male. They like to be alpha, and aggression and power, and they just, everything they do is just stronger, bigger, and everything, right? So I'm making them sound a little bit like a bad guy, but fires a lot of times are like the ones that people that get things done, and a lot of leaders often are fire. Fires often are like the most common leaders. You know, they're the ones that take charge, take the lead, and they're very brave people, typically. Okay, so let's go to waters. Perfect opposite of the fire, right? And the water, you want to think of water literally like the coolest thing. Like waters are the most adaptable. So a couple words to describe water is healing, service, connection, movement. So waters, think of like flowing water. You know, water is very calm. It's very healing. It can change. Water can turn into a solid ice, kind of like earth, or water can evaporate and turn kind of into air. It can become, so waters are unique. A lot of times waters are the ones who get more confused about what their personality is. If you cannot figure out which of these energies you are, you might be water. Because waters are like, I can do that, and I can be that, and I can do this sometimes, I can do this, I can do all this, and you are this, and and by the way, waters are my personal favorite. I think waters are the most powerful because they can be so calm, so still, but then you get your waterfalls that are so powerful, and then your hurricanes that can just take things out, right? So waters are kind of the one, like they are very service driven. They like helping the world. They care about people. They like, and they're often the ones that are soft spoken, and they like to listen. They're very willing to put themselves on the back burner. And so a lot of times fires love waters because fires like to talk about themselves a lot, and then waters will just listen because they just love, like they're willing to make people feel good about themselves. And it's funny though, because if you ever see a water boil up and get mad, a water can just snap and blow up like crazy, right? So waters have a very healing power. Like they're very good at connecting, and often waters can see more than the other energies. They can just kind of connect with people, and they can see things a lot easier. So the other energies would do really well to listen to waters and to value their opinion more. The problem is that a lot of waters are so timid, and they almost don't know what they know, and so they're almost scared to be who they are because they don't know who they are. So they're scared to share their opinions. And so if you're a water, like learn yourself and learn how to share your opinions and believe in yourself, and because people value that. It's good, and you're often right. One thing about waters you got to be very careful of is, just like the fire is overly confident sometimes and very brave, the waters can be overly fearful and very scared. So make sure your decisions are not based on fear, because you are very correct in how you see the world a lot of times, but if you're very fear driven, then that can completely distort your reality if you're water. So waters and fires are very opposite, right? And waters very much value the service, and they value connection and emotions, and they're typically very sensitive. You know, like if you a fire, often the typical fight is like a fire might be talking kind of like this. They're just talking kind of aggressive, kind of loud, and they're not even mad. They're just talking like this. And the water's like, oh, you're talking loud. Like, that's so rough. You're so, like, and the fire's like, what? I didn't do anything. I'm not even mad. And the water's like, yeah, it's just rough. You're just talking loud. Can you chill out a bit? Take a chill pill or relax. That's the typical dynamic here. So anyways, enough about waters. Let's move over to the earths. The earths are the perfect opposite of air. Okay, and earths are like, think of a mountain or a heavy rock. They're solid, they're steady, they're loyal, detail-oriented, logic-driven. Earths are also solid, steady people typically. Their energy, they're very still. Typically, they're very stoic. A little more melancholy prone, very artistic people naturally. But a lot of times, like the earth energies, they don't care as much about connecting with people. They still want that connection, but a lot of times they like to do what's logical. And they like to do what makes sense. They want to read the instruction manual, and they want to be able to make sure things are done the right way. Okay, so whereas if you look at an air energy, they can't do things the right way. So can you, like, the dynamic here is like they love these things about each other. Like it's air just loves the consistency and the steady, the loyal, and the, like I'm an air, right? So like, I mean, the girls that can just, they know what they believe and they're steady and strong women, like that's awesome. And then, but then like also like it can be frustrating for an earth being like, man, this air energy, he just can't clean his room. He can't follow instructions. He just can't be on time to things. And the air is like, dude, this earth needs to lighten up. Like they are so rigid. They can't even they haven't eaten food in 2 days and they haven't smiled in 3 days. Right. So earths aren't always like melancholy, but their energy can be very like heavy and earth, like just steady. So I'm just going to think of like general people or maybe even Disney characters. So like your earth energies are more like your beast in Beauty and the Beast. He's kind of like he's like very serious, very like thinking a lot, very deep, very artistic, very strong-willed, whereas your air energies are a lot more like your like Spider-Man. Spider-Man's an air energy. The Hulk is like an earth. Fire is going to be your Thor, very Thor or Iron Man, and then your water is going to be actually like your Superman. Superman, like he just wants to like, Superman is very like earth and water and earth, right? Yeah, so ultimately with these energy types, there's always, not always, but you most of the time have a strong primary energy with a good secondary. So, for example, me, I am predominantly an air with a really strong fire, and sometimes it's like almost even. I have like a good chunk of earth and like zero water, right? I have like no water in me. I don't understand waters. I don't understand the need to go serve and do these things. Like, it's not that I don't value it. It's just that that's not my energy, right? But like an air fire is very different than a fire air, right? Like a fire air is going to be someone that is like very fire driven with like some fun to back it up, whereas air is like very fun driven with some drive to back up that fun. And you get your people that are very fire earth, very like competitive, very driven, and then with a strong backup of logic. And these people are like the most focused, diligent, steady, strong people, but they can afford to usually lighten up a little bit and remember people in their life sometimes, because like they're on this side of the quadrant. But then that's very different though than like an earth fire. An earth fire, a good earth fire example would be Batman. Very melancholy, very like details, logic, very in his head a lot, but he's got like some good drive to back up those thoughts and everything, right? Whereas you take an earth water or a water earth, like a earth water, a good earth water would be, I think Superman, or maybe Superman's like an earth water, but like, they both, Batman and Superman are both earth, but they're very different kinds of people. Like Superman's drive a lot more is to save the world and to find himself and these things, and whereas Batman, his drive is very much different. Like they're both really cool characters, right? And then you got your air, water airs. Those are going to be a lot more your Spider-Man kind of characters, but your air fire is going to be a lot more like Iron Man. A little bit like kind of goofy, always messing around, but very driven and competitive at the same time. The coolest thing about these is there's not like a test to take or anything. It's like, what do you connect with? Not what you want to be, but what do you connect with? What do you actually relate with the most? And then like, what do you relate with second most? And then you can start finding out ways to connect with people. For example, if you're a fire earth, you probably don't even realize that, but you probably overwhelm waters a lot, and you probably annoy airs a lot. So if you pay attention, you might realize like, oh, if I want to connect with this person who's like very water and air, maybe I'll tone my voice down just a little bit. Even if I'm not mad, I'll just simply talk a little more gentle. Talk a little bit like this. When I shake their hand, a little bit softer. Pat them on the back a little softer. Maybe to this air energy, I'll be slightly more flexible on my terms, or I won't be so rigid when I talk about the details or the rules of the game. Or if you're an air and a water, you need to realize like, hey, like rules and details and stuff are not so important to you. Like the stress and the pressure and the ambition might not be as big of a deal to you, but like when you're talking to a fire and an earth, you're gonna come across as very annoying sometimes because you just you're not showing any backbone to them. So like you can shake their hand hard, show what your dream is and show a little bit of drive and like what you've tried to accomplish, and that means a lot to these people. And I know it sounds very counterintuitive to a lot of your energy, but it's authentic to connect with people like this. You don't have to be fake. You can connect with what their energy actually is. So these are the personality types, and in another section, I'm actually going to talk about how poker players are in these energy types, and classifying the poker players and actually what their weaknesses typically are, and then how to exploit them. Also, if you have those weaknesses, how to protect yourself from those weaknesses you have. So hope this, overall video really helps. This is actually something I use in my life all the time, and it really works really well. So hope it brings you guys value. Stay tuned for future videos about this topic. See you guys later.